My brother fired me as soon as he my position in our family business, but had to call me after. The orchid died first. 3 weeks after my termination, my carefully cultivated office plant, the one that had survived 12 years of fluorescent lights and erratic air conditioning, withered in the corner of Milo's newly renovated office. I noticed it immediately when security escorted me back into the building. Its once vibrant purple blooms now brown and shriveled, a fitting metaphor for what had happened to my career at Westwood Estate Management. Sophie, thank God you're here, Milo exclaimed, rising from behind what used to be my desk. My younger brother looked like he hadn't slept in days, his usually immaculate appearance disheveled, his designer shirt wrinkled, his eyes bloodshot behind fashionable glasses. I set my purse down carefully on the visitor's chair, the same chair where he had sat 3 weeks earlier to inform me that my services were no longer aligned with the company's forward-thinking direction. You killed my orchid, I said mildly. Milo blinked, momentarily derailed. That's not important right now. The system is down, completely down. The client presentation is in 4 hours, and we can't access any of the files. I glanced at the dead plant again. Phalaenopsis amabilis requires water once a week. Modest, indirect sunlight. It's not complicated. Sophie, please. Milo ran both hands through his hair, a gesture of frustration I recognized from our childhood. I know you're angry. You have every right to be. But the Goldstein account, the one you set up last year, we need access to those files for the presentation. It could mean millions for the company. Our company, I corrected, though it wasn't really mine anymore. Not since the board led by our Uncle Gerald had voted to appoint 31-year-old Milo as the new operations manager, effectively demoting me after 12 years of service to Westwood Estates. Not since Milo had decided, in his infinite wisdom acquired from his recent MBA, that my methods were outdated and that I needed to be transitioned out of the role. Yes, our company, Milo agreed desperately, and it's in serious trouble if we don't fix this. The consultants can't figure it out. It is clueless. You're the only one who understands the system. I smiled then, not out of pleasure at his distress, but at the sheer predictability of it all. 3 weeks ago, I had warned him that his fancy new consultants didn't understand the infrastructure I had built, that the modernization they proposed would destabilize the entire system, that the proprietary database I had developed over a decade couldn't simply be replaced by off-the-shelf solutions. It's holding us back. Sophie, he had said dismissively. Henley Consulting says we're using archaic methods. We need to move into the digital age. As if I had been running the company's operations with an abacus and paper ledgers instead of the highly customized digital ecosystem I had constructed specifically for our unique business needs. Now, judging by the panic in his eyes, reality had finally caught up with my little brother. What exactly is the problem? I asked, removing my jacket and draping it over my purse. Everything, Milo gestured wildly at his computer. The database is throwing errors. None of the property files will open. The presentation templates are corrupted. The client portal is showing random numbers instead of the actual investment projections. It's a disaster. I nodded thoughtfully. And the consultants, the ones you paid $200,000 to modernize our archaic systems. Milo had the grace to look embarrassed. They said it must have been a flaw in the original programming, that whoever designed it didn't follow standard protocols. Of course they did. Blame the previous developer the easiest scapegoat when consultants mess up systems they don't understand. I see, I said, moving around the desk to examine his computer screen. And what exactly do you want me to do about it? Fix it, Milo pleaded. You know this system better than anyone. We need those files for the Goldstein presentation. I straightened up and looked my brother directly in the eyes. Why should I? The question hung in the air between us, heavy with 3 weeks of accumulated resentment. 3 weeks since I had been escorted out of the building with a cardboard box of personal items. My key card deactivated before I reached the parking lot. 3 weeks of silence from the family members who sat on the board, including our father, who had founded Westwood Estates but had been too conflicted to vote against Milo's recommendation for my termination. Because, Milo faltered, clearly unprepared for my response. In his world, I had always been the helpful older sister, the fixer, the one who made problems disappear, because the company needs you. The company fired me, I reminded him, on your recommendation. Outdated methods, resistant to innovation, too entrenched in legacy systems. Those were your exact words in the termination meeting. He had the decency to wince. I was wrong. Okay, I admit it. The consultants were wrong. We shouldn't have tried to overhaul your system without understanding it first. And yet you did. I moved back to the visitor's chair and sat down, crossing my legs comfortably. Let me be clear. Milo, I can fix your problem. I can have the system up and running in time for your presentation. But I won't do it as a favor to the brother who destroyed my career, nor as a parting gift to the company that discarded me. What do you want? He asked, defeat evident in his slumped shoulders. A contract, I replied promptly. As an independent consultant, my fee is $5,000 per hour, with a minimum engagement of 10 hours. Milo's eyes widened. $50,000? That's extortion. That's the market rate for emergency IT intervention from a specialist with unique system knowledge. I corrected him. Ask your consultants what they would charge to fix this if they actually could. I guarantee it would be more. He started to argue, then glanced at his watch and visibly deflated. Fine. Whatever it costs. I'll have legal draw up the paperwork. No need. I reached into my purse and extracted a folder. I took the liberty of preparing the contract in advance. Sign here and here. The company credit card number goes on this line for the retainer charge. Milo blinked at me, momentarily speechless. You knew this would happen. I smiled. Let's just say I understand systems. Milo, not just computer systems, but people systems too. Patterns are my specialty. As he signed the contract with a slightly shaking hand, I reflected on the patterns that had led us here. The classic family business dynamic of the next generation wanting to make its mark. The younger sibling eager to prove himself by rejecting his predecessor's methods. The eternal corporate cycle of consultants destroying functional systems to justify their fees. And, of course, the most predictable pattern of all people never value what they have until it's gone. Now, I said, taking the signed contract and tucking it safely into my purse. Let's see what mess your consultants have made of my life's work. When I built the Westwood estate management system 12 years ago, our family business was still using paper files and Excel spreadsheets. We managed 38 properties worth approximately $80 million. And the inefficiencies were costing us thousands each month in missed opportunities and administrative overhead. Fresh out of college with dual degrees in computer science and business administration, I had approached my father with a proposal: give me 6 months to digitize and centralize our operations, and I would save the company at least 20% in administrative costs, while increasing property management efficiency by 30%. Dad, always one to recognize value, had given me the chance. 6 months later, the prototype of what would become our proprietary management system was operational. Within a year, we had exceeded both targets I had promised. Over the subsequent decade, as I continuously refined and expanded the system, Westwood grew to manage over 200 properties valued at more than $500 million. The system wasn't just software. It was an intricate ecosystem that integrated property maintenance schedules, tenant communications, investment projections, market analyses, and regulatory compliance. I had built redundancies, fail-safes, and security protocols that had kept us operational through power outages, attempted cyber attacks, and even a small fire in the server room 3 years ago. Most importantly, I had designed it specifically for Westwood's unique needs, with interfaces intuitive to our staff and workflows aligned with our business practices. It wasn't fancy or flashy, unlike the slick, template-based presentation my brother had shown the board when arguing for modernization, but it was robust, secure, and effective, none of which appeared to have been communicated to the consultants who had spent the past 3 weeks dismantling it piece by piece. What exactly were they trying to accomplish? I asked Milo as I examined the database error logs. which scrolled endlessly across his screen. Migration to cloud-based architecture, he replied, hovering anxiously behind me. Henley said our on-premises servers were outdated and vulnerable. I suppressed a sigh. Our servers are in a climate-controlled, physically secured room with both on-site and off-site backups running every 6 hours. The vulnerability assessment I commissioned last year found 0 critical issues and only 2 medium priority concerns, both of which I addressed immediately. Well, they said, I know what they said, Milo, I interrupted, typing rapidly as I navigated through the system's backend. They said whatever justified their fee. Did anyone actually check their references? Did anyone verify their experience with hybrid systems similar to ours? His silence was answer enough. As I worked, the full extent of the damage became clear. The consultants had attempted to migrate our database to a cloud platform without proper understanding of its structure or the interdependencies between modules. In the process, they had corrupted key configuration files, broken established connections between data tables, and somehow managed to scramble the encryption protocols that protected our most sensitive client information. It was, in technical terms, a complete clusterfuck. How long will it take to fix? Milo asked after 30 minutes of watching me work in silence. To restore basic functionality for your presentation, about 3 hours. I replied without looking up. To undo all the damage they've done and properly implement the changes they were attempting, weeks, possibly months. He groaned. The board meeting is next week. Uncle Gerald is already talking about bringing in another consulting firm to fix what Henley broke. I paused my typing and looked at him directly. That would be like hiring a second arsonist to put out the fire started by the first one. What choice do we have? Milo ran his hands through his hair again, leaving it sticking up at odd angles. The system is critical to our operations. Every day its down costs us thousands. You could rehire the person who built it, I suggested mildly. The one who warned you this exact scenario would happen if you let consultants with no understanding of our business tamper with it. Milo had the grace to look abashed. Sophie, He was interrupted by a sharp knock on the office door, a moment later. Our cousin Rebecca, head of client relations, burst in, her expression frantic. The Goldsteins just called, she announced. They're moving the meeting up to noon instead of 3 p.m. Something about a conflict with their flight back to Chicago. Milo paled visibly. Noon, that's less than 2 hours from now, Sophie. Can you? I heard, I said, turning back to the computer. This changes things. I can restore the presentation files and access to the Goldstein property records. But the client portal won't be operational in time. You'll have to use static projections instead of the interactive models. But the interactive models were the main selling point, Rebecca protested. Jason Goldstein specifically mentioned how impressed he was with the property visualization tool during the preliminary meeting. Then someone shouldn't have let consultants break it, I replied, fingers flying across the keyboard. This is the best I can do in 2 hours. Rebecca turned to Milo, her expression accusatory. I told you bringing in those consultants was a mistake. Sophie's system worked perfectly fine. Not now, Becca, Milo snapped. Just go stall the Goldsteins if they arrive early. Tell them we're enhancing their presentation or something. After Rebecca left, muttering under her breath, Milo collapsed into the visitor's chair. This is a disaster, he moaned. The Goldstein account would expand our Chicago presence by 30%. If we lose it because of the system failure, then perhaps the board will reconsider their recent personnel decisions. I finished, a touch more sharply than intended. The next hour passed in tense silence as I methodically reconstructed the critical pathways necessary to access the Goldstein files. The work was detailed and delicate, untangling the mess created by well-meaning but ignorant hands attempting to modernize a system they fundamentally didn't understand. By 11:30 a.m., I had managed to restore access to the presentation files and the basic property records. The images were still corrupted, and the financial projections would need to be manually calculated rather than automatically generated. But it was something. This is the best I can do for now, I told Milo, standing up and stretching my cramped shoulders. The presentation template is functional. The property listings are accessible. You'll need to use the backup images from the shared drive, and Rebecca will have to present the ROI projections from the spreadsheet I just restored. Milo looked at me with something between gratitude and desperation. Can't you stay for the presentation just to make sure nothing crashes? I checked my watch pointedly. My contract was for system restoration, not client handholding. Besides, I have a lunch meeting in 30 minutes. A job interview, he asked, suddenly looking concerned. Something like that, I replied vaguely. In truth, I was meeting with a commercial real estate developer who had approached me about creating a custom property management system for their portfolio, a potential client for my newly established consulting business. Milo swallowed hard. Sophie, look, I know I messed up. I should have listened to you about the system, about a lot of things. Yes, you should have. I agreed, gathering my purse and jacket. But that's not why you're apologizing now. You're apologizing because you need something from me, not because you genuinely understand what you did wrong. His face flushed. That's not fair. Isn't it? I raised an eyebrow. 3 weeks, Milo. 3 weeks since you had me escorted out of the building by security. Did you call to check on me even once? Did any of the family? Besides Mom. His silence was damning. That's what I thought, I continued. You didn't fire me because my methods were outdated. You fired me because I was a reminder that you hadn't earned your position, that you were appointed by family connections rather than merit. That's not. It is. I cut him off. And the irony is, I would have supported you as operations manager if you had approached it as a partnership. If you had valued the institutional knowledge and expertise I've developed over 12 years, instead of dismissing it as resistance to change. I moved toward the door, then paused. The system will hold for your presentation, but it's still fundamentally compromised without proper restoration. You'll face cascading failures in the coming days as interdependent modules continue to conflict. What are we supposed to do? Milo asked, his voice small. That, I said as I opened the door, is no longer my problem. Day. The call came 3 days later, while I was reviewing the contract for my new client. The commercial developer had been impressed by my portfolio and was eager to engage my services for a comprehensive system design at twice my former salary at Westwood. Sophie Clark, I answered, not recognizing the number. Ms. Clark, this is Gerald Westwood. My uncle's voice was formal, almost stiff. As board chairman and my father's elder brother, Gerald had always embodied the conservative, old money mentality that characterized our family's older generation. I'm calling regarding a matter of some urgency. Uncle Gerald, I replied, keeping my tone neutral. What can I do for you? The board has called an emergency meeting this afternoon to discuss the situation with our operating systems. Your presence has been requested. I noted his careful phrasing, requested, not required, as I was no longer an employee. I see, and what exactly would be the purpose of my attendance? A pause. To provide technical expertise regarding the necessary steps to restore full functionality. I believe I've already provided that expertise, I said. During my consulting engagement 3 days ago, I informed Milo that proper restoration would require weeks of dedicated work by someone intimately familiar with the system architecture. Yes, well, Gerald cleared his throat uncomfortably. The situation has deteriorated somewhat since then. I allowed myself a small smile. Has it? Several key modules have become non-responsive. The property management interface is generating erroneous maintenance schedules. The tenant portal has begun sending automated communications with incorrect information. And this morning, the accounting system appears to have randomized certain financial records. Randomized, I repeated, struggling not to laugh. You mean the relational database is attempting to resolve conflicting instructions from the improperly implemented migration process, resulting in data being assigned to incorrect fields. A beat of silence. If you say so. I do say so, I replied, and I also said this would happen when Milo first proposed bringing in outside consultants to modernize a system they didn't understand. Sophie. Gerald's voice took on a wheedling quality I had never heard from him before. The company is in crisis. Whatever disagreements led to your departure, must be set aside for the good of Westwood. I was fired. Uncle Gerald, I said bluntly. Let's not sugarcoat it. On my brother's recommendation, and with the board's approval, including yours and Dad's. Those weren't disagreements. That was a termination. Perhaps that decision was precipitous, he admitted reluctantly, which is why the board wishes to discuss potential arrangements for your return. I leaned back in my chair, considering. What time is the meeting? 2:00. I'll be there, I promised. But Uncle Gerald, be prepared for my terms. They won't be what you're expecting.
네, 줘.
The Westwood Estate Management boardroom hadn't changed in the 3 weeks since my termination meeting. The same massive mahogany table dominated the space, surrounded by 12 leather chairs, most of which were now occupied by anxious-looking board members and executives. My father sat at Gerald's right hand, his expression a complex mixture of pride and chagrin when I entered the room. Mila was notably absent. Ah, Sophie. Gerald rose to greet me with artificial warmth. Thank you for coming on such short notice. My pleasure, I replied, taking a seat at the opposite end of the table from the board chairman. I understand you're experiencing some technical difficulties. One of the board members, Davis Hamilton, an old friend of my father's, snorted. Technical difficulties, the entire system has gone haywire. We sent out incorrect eviction notices to 17 corporate tenants yesterday. The maintenance crew showed up at the wrong properties. The financial report I received this morning showed us owning buildings in Zimbabwe. For God's sake. And the Goldstein account, I inquired, glancing around the room. Did the presentation go well? My father winced visibly. They've decided to pursue other management options. I see, I replied calmly. That's unfortunate. The Goldsteins would have been a significant addition to our Chicago portfolio. Sophie, Gerald interrupted, clearly eager to move past this uncomfortable topic. We've asked you here to discuss the restoration of our operational systems. The consultants from Henley have admitted they cannot resolve the issues they encountered during the modernization process. You mean the issues they created? I corrected. Let's be precise in our language. Uncle Gerald, Henley Consulting attempted to migrate a custom-built, highly integrated system to a generic cloud platform without proper understanding of its architecture or dependencies. They weren't encountering issues, they were actively generating them through incompetence. An uncomfortable silence fell over the room. Be that as it may, Gerald continued stiffly. We need to restore functionality as quickly as possible. Every day of disruption costs the company thousands in lost efficiency and potential client relationships. Millions, actually, I corrected again. My last analysis showed operational disruptions costing approximately $23,000 per day in direct expenses and up to $180,000 in opportunity costs, depending on the active acquisition negotiations. Davis Hamilton let out a low whistle. Jesus, that's over $1 million a week. Which brings us to the purpose of this meeting. Gerald pressed on. Sophie, the board would like to engage your services to restore the system to full functionality and provide ongoing maintenance. I smiled. I'm afraid that won't be possible. Gerald frowned. We're prepared to offer a very generous consulting fee. I'm not interested in a consulting arrangement, I interrupted. Nor am I interested in simply restoring a system that the company clearly didn't value until it stopped working. What are you saying? My father asked, speaking for the first time. I'm saying that my terms for involvement are non-negotiable, I replied, opening my briefcase and extracting a folder. I've prepared a document outlining the conditions under which I would consider addressing Westwood's current technical crisis. I handed copies to each board member and waited as they reviewed the contents. The reactions ranged from disbelief to outrage as they reached the key points. This is absurd, Gerald sputtered. You want reinstatement as CTO, a position that doesn't even exist in our company structure with a board seat and controlling authority over all technical decisions. And compensation at 3 times my previous salary, I added helpfully. Plus back pay for the 3 weeks since my termination. Calculated at my new consulting rate of $5,000 per hour for a standard 40-hour week. Davis Hamilton was turning an alarming shade of purple. That's extortion. No, I corrected calmly. It's market value for the expertise you now realize you can't function without. I've included comparable compensation packages for CTOs at companies of similar size and complexity for reference. You'll note my requirements are actually below the 75th percentile. Sophie, my father began placatingly, surely we can reach a reasonable compromise. This is my compromise. I cut him off. My initial impulse was to decline any involvement whatsoever and watch as 12 years of my work crumbled along with Westwood's reputation and client base. Instead, I'm offering you a path forward, albeit one that acknowledges the true value of my contributions. Gerald leaned forward, his expression severe. And if we refuse your terms, then you have several options, I replied, ticking them off on my fingers. One, hire another team of consultants and hope they can reverse engineer my system before the company collapses under mounting operational failures. 2, attempt to rebuild from scratch, which would take approximately 18 months, assuming you can find someone with my skill set willing to work for what Westwood typically pays. Or 3, continue with your current approach of band-aid fixes and watch as the system's integrity deteriorates further with each passing day. I closed my briefcase with a decisive click. I've scheduled meetings with 3 other property management firms this week who are interested in custom system development. Unlike Westwood, they seem to recognize the value of specialized expertise. I'll need your decision by Friday. As I stood to leave, my father's voice stopped me. Why are you doing this? Sophie, this is our family's company. I turned to face him directly. Yes, it is, and for 12 years, I poured everything I had into building systems that helped it thrive. Systems that were dismissed as outdated by a brother who couldn't be bothered to understand them before replacing me. Systems that the board, including you, Dad voted to place in the hands of consultants with flashy presentations and no actual knowledge of our business. I glanced around the table at the assembled board members. This isn't about revenge, it's about respect, about finally being valued for what I've built and what I can continue to build. If Westwood wants my expertise, it will be on terms that reflect its true worth as a fundamental component of the company's success, not as an afterthought to be discarded when convenient. With that, I walked out of the boardroom, leaving behind a stunned silence. As the door closed behind me, I heard Davis Hamilton's voice. Well, I'll be damned. Thomas, your daughter has bigger balls than half the men in this room. I smiled all the way to the elevator. 2 days later, Gerald called to inform me that the board had unanimously approved my terms. All of them. 1 week after that, I returned to Westwood Estate Management, not as the overlooked systems administrator who had been so easily dismissed, but as Chief Technology Officer and the newest member of the Board of Directors. My first official act was to fire Henley Consulting and reclaim control of our technical infrastructure. My second was to hire 2 brilliant young developers who had previously been rejected because they didn't have the right pedigree for a Westwood employee. Milo avoided me for the first month of my return, slinking around corners when he saw me coming and sending emails rather than speaking to me directly. When we finally had our inevitable confrontation, it was in the break room over the last cup of coffee. You can have it, he said quickly, withdrawing his hand from the coffee pot. Milo, I sighed, we need to talk. He grimaced but nodded, following me to my new office considerably larger than my previous workspace and featuring a healthy, thriving orchid on the windowsill. I owe you an apology, he began as soon as the door closed. I was arrogant and dismissive of your work. I let my insecurity about following in your footsteps drive me to make terrible decisions. Yes, I agreed simply. You did. He blinked, clearly expecting me to soften the moment with reassurances. When none came, he continued awkwardly. I've been thinking about what you said about how I could have approached this as a partnership instead of trying to replace you. And, I prompted, and I was wondering if that offer might still be on the table. He finished. Not as your boss, obviously, but maybe as someone who could learn from you while contributing the new perspectives I gained during my MBA. I studied my younger brother thoughtfully. The past month had been humbling for him, stripped of his brief authority as operations manager and reassigned to business development, where his networking skills could be useful without giving him direct control over existing systems or personnel. It won't be easy, I warned him. Trust takes longer to rebuild than it does to break. I know, he said, looking more serious than I'd ever seen him. But I'd like to try, for the company, and for us. I nodded slowly. All right. Start by learning the system, really learning it, not just the surface functionality. Understand why it's built the way it is before you propose changes. For the first time since my return, Milo smiled genuinely. I can do that. Thank you, Sophie. Don't thank me yet, I replied, returning his smile with a smaller one of my own. I'm still your sister, which means I'm going to be twice as hard on you as anyone else. I'd expect nothing less, he admitted, especially from our new CTO. As he left my office, I turned to look out the window at the Boston skyline beyond. Sometimes, systems fail because of technical glitches or external attacks. But more often, they fail because people don't recognize their value until they stop working. Fortunately for Westwood Estate Management, their system, both technical and human, was now stronger than ever. And so was I.